Hey, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Screen Society podcast. I'm your host, Logan, and I'm so excited to kick this show off with you all. If you're a fan of movies, TV shows, rewatches, recaps, entertainment news, and just nerding out about storytelling, you've come to the right place. So go ahead and grab your popcorn, settle in, and let's get into it. This show is going to cover all sorts of things, TV and film. We're going to do reviews of the newest shows and movies, throwback watches of classics we all love or maybe don't as much. I am always game for debate and discussion about the shows you love or hate. Entertainment news, casting rumors, cancellations, renewals, trailers, you name it, we've got it. I'm going to recap some ongoing shows so that you don't fall behind or you can watch along with us. Deep dive into stories, characters, plot twists, and fan theories. And boy, are there a lot of them right now. And of course, the occasional great debate between myself and you all, the listeners. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited to get started on this podcast. This has been a little bit in the coming of just some different podcasts that I've already done. And if you want to go ahead and listen to Soups and Sabers, I was on there recently with Jordan. This is part of the Log Jam Media podcasting network that Jordan and I started way back in the day, and we will continue on the same feed as well. So there will be some content and some overlap between those two, obviously. So I'll record some of those with Jordan and we'll put them up on this podcast feed, and some of the episodes that'll go up on here will also go over onto the podcast feeds over there. So we can be found in all sorts of different locations, but the places you can find us: YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can listen or watch us however you feel. Like, subscribe, comment, share, review. It helps people find the show. It will help people get into the conversation about the different shows that we're going to be watching, movies that we're going to be watching. I'm always up for recommendations, so let me know what shows or TV, different things on TV that I haven't seen or movies that I haven't seen. We'll go back and rewatch or watch some of those, recap those as they're released. We'll talk about trailers. We'll talk about some of the news coming up. We're not going to cover everything in entertainment because that would be an extraordinary ask, but we are going to be covering as much as we possibly can. I'm Logan, host of this show, lifelong movie watcher, TV marathoner, and firm believer that popcorn is a food group. I grew up watching everything from animated classics to big budget blockbusters, and somewhere between midnight premiere movie tickets and binge watching entire series in a weekend. I realized I love talking about this stuff as much as I loved watching it. So here we are on this podcast, and we're going to start something new together. We're going to be kicking off the Screen Society podcast by talking about The Pit, which is a show currently going on HBO Max. It already had its first season, and it debuted its first episode of season 2 this last week. So we're going to be dropping a podcast before episode 2 starts. I'm just getting over an illness, so I will be recording that later on in the week so that I don't fry my voice as I'm just getting back to full strength. And I just did an hour and a half long podcast with Jordan over on Soups and Sabers, part of the Log Jam Media podcast network, where we talked about the conclusion of Stranger Things, and we'll get into that as well. We'll talk some Stranger Things on this podcast because I feel that there are still some things that I would like to discuss and have some over conversation about in the coming weeks as we move and transition on from a show that has meant so much to me. I just did a top 5 episode breakdown over on Jordan's podcast, and you can go over and check that out. I'll actually retweet it once he makes that public, and we'll make sure you guys get over there and listen to that. But if you're listening right now, I thought I would get into some of what we're going to be discussing coming up. Obviously, The Pit, like I said, season 2, episode 1. We will do a full recap coming up this week that will drop hopefully on Tuesday, and then on next Sunday, I'll be recording. That's when I'll start recording these weekly podcasts. There will be at least one episode a week, unless I find some free time to record other things, or I have to record something because news broke or there's a new trailer or whatever it might be. But we'll be doing these weekly. I will record on Sunday and hopefully drop them on Monday morning, so that way you can listen to it on your commute to work, or whatever it might be. There might be some drops on Sunday as well, depending on how many episodes of different podcast episodes I release. So hoping to record a couple episodes here and there. But for the start of things, make sure to look out on your podcast feed on Monday because that's when we'll try to start to regularly schedule some kind of content, whatever that might be. Might be one episode, might be two, but Mondays will always be the drop of how many episodes I do a week. Might do some bonus episodes to start us out with once we get underneath kind of a regiment and whatever it might be. My voice comes back. So I'll record quite a bit of content on Sunday so I can release all sorts of different episodes. So looking forward to that. We'll be covering the Game of Thrones series, Seven Kingdoms, coming out soon on HBO Max. So we are returning to Westeros and we're returning to Game of Thrones, and I'm really excited about that. A lot of things coming up, movies on the list of different things coming out in 2026 that I'm really excited about. So looking forward to that. But I thought I'd start out by talking about TV because I've got my five favorite TV shows. I got my five favorite movies that I've seen, with a little bit of caveat there with the movies. But I thought I'd get in five and five, do two quick sessions here of five favorite TV shows, five favorite movies, just so you get to know me a little bit better. We'll talk about an honorable mention for TV shows, so maybe there will be six on this list. But to start out, and I'm not going to do the ranking that I did over on Jordan's podcast. You can go over and listen to that to listen how I rank these. But here are six, I guess, of my favorite TV shows. Home Improvement is in an echelon of itself. I usually try to keep it out of my rankings when I'm talking about ranking TV shows, just because I grew up watching Home Improvement. I've always loved the storytelling there. I've always felt that it's really hard to rank that one because it's got so many memories and lasting stories and everything else like that. So I've always kind of put it into its category of its own where it can't be touched. It is one that I think over my lifetime was my favorite, and I still go back and revisit it every once in a while. But I will say that there are so many great shows that have come out since, and so many things that we will continue to talk about that will get up into the rankings maybe. So this list is always changing. A lot of my favorite TV shows obviously have come out recently. Three of the five that are, I guess, three of the six I'm going to talk about. But Home Improvement, I think, exists in an echelon of itself. The next one I want to talk about that's really shaped everything in high school, I really latched on to The Office, obviously a legendary TV show, one that continues to resonate with so many today. And I will continue to always be a big time fan of the Jim and Pam relationship in that TV show. I thought it was one of the best as far as TV is concerned, just how the relationship builds and grows. I love it so much. I love Michael Scott. I love Dwight. I think that it's one of the best written shows that we've gotten in a very long time, if not ever. I think its comedy is unmatched at times. It just feels like they came up with things that were so groundbreaking, revolutionary, that I felt that, The Office is a really hard one to try to move out of a top five list. The next one would be Friends. I loved Friends growing up. In high school is when I started to really watch it. Obviously, it came out well before I was in high school, but I really latched onto it and its storylines when I was about 17 or 18, and I continued watching it through college. And I would watch it over and over again. I would hit season 10 and I would start right back up again and watch it once again. And then my friends that I met, Jordan, who I'll podcast with quite a bit on here, and Matt and I, we really loved Friends. We quote it all the time. We still watch it all the time. It's the one TV show that I can continue to come back to, turn on and quote a lot of the different things. And I know the episodes like the back of my hand. It's quite a show that I can binge at any time. And it's one that is my comfort blanket, if you will. It's the one that's gotten me through all sorts of different aspects of life. And it continues to resonate with me today. As I am 32, the storylines and everything else happening in the Friends universe are very relevant to what goes on in my life today, just the different things they have to deal with becoming adults and then also living out their adult lives. Obviously, I think I'm a little older than obviously they were back then when it first started. So, I mean, not the actual actors and actresses, but I think I'm older than what the Friends were written as. So it is interesting to see that in that dynamic, because I started out not knowing what that life would look like right outside of college. And as I started to get into adulthood in my mid 20s, that's when it really started to take place for these fictional characters and Friends. But I still resonate with it today. And one of the first TV shows that I really felt like I latched onto and became a huge fan of, besides The Office and Home Improvement. Then I move into another TV show that is another top for me. So if you're counting at Home Improvement is like the honorable mention. I don't really put it in my top five because it really kind of exists as its own entity. It's kind of my foundation. And then the other ones are just so much better as far as like the development of the show, I feel. And I know Home Improvement was the most popular TV show at its time, but I still feel like sometimes the stories don't kind of resonate as much as they do for me, at least as I've gotten older. I still love that show dearly, but there are some things in Home Improvement that just don't hit home with me as much as they did when I was a little bit younger. But that being said, Game of Thrones, moving on, dramatic, it blew my mind at many times. I didn't watch it when Game of Thrones was released. I didn't watch it until after it had completed its run on HBO. And I will say, I appreciate the finale a lot more than a lot of others. I know it's a very divisive, maybe it's not even divisive. I know a lot of people did not like the ending of Game of Thrones. I didn't mind the ending of Game of Thrones. I think it makes sense. I think looking back at the characters, there were some obvious character development stories that I wish would have gone in a different direction. But that being said, it's the way stories go, right? We can't have our perfect ending on all these stories, and none of the shows I think are absolutely perfect in everything that they decide to do with the characters. There are different things that you come up with as a fan, and some theories that you come up with a fan, that you hope happen. That you kind of picture this big ending, and sometimes, a lot of times, the finales are sort of letdowns because you've culminated all of this information. You've gone through all of these things. You felt all these emotions for decades sometimes with some of these shows, and then it comes to an end. You're not happy that it's ended. You're not happy that it didn't end the exact way that you thought it would or wanted it to. So then you go and try to nitpick it. That's never been my style. I've always appreciated the story for what it is, and I think Game of Thrones is exactly that type of ending. It's got some of the best character development I've ever seen. It has the biggest plot twist I've ever seen as far as shows are concerned, and I think that's where sometimes we get into this mentality as we're consuming media anymore, where everything has to be a twist. Everything has to mean more than what it actually means. I think we have a hard time with media literacy, and I'm hoping through this podcast we can have honest discussion about that. I think that um, so many people are ruined on shows because they just I think that there is this belief that you have to believe like others believe, and I think you get into these algorithms on social media. You start to believe what others are saying, and then you get into this black hole or wormhole of like everything that you're hearing, or this your echo chamber of just like hearing all these negative things. And I think that's what's happened with Stranger Things. When Stranger Things ended, and we'll get into that, or Game of Thrones ended, there was there were people that were positive on some of these endings. Maybe not Game of Thrones so much because I don't remember that, but Stranger Things definitely. We'll get into that next because that's another show that's in my top five. There's just so many things that are said online that if you can kind of negate that, or not listen to that right away and let the show kind of settle, the ending kind of settle. When I got done watching Game of Thrones, when I got done watching Stranger Things, when I got done watching Friends, um, I really enjoyed the ending because I just let it settle for the story that it was, and it does wrap up each of those stories. And did I think it would end on a different way? Yeah, like I think we all do. We all come up with these theories and what's coming next. Am I sad it's ended? Yes. Am I sad that there's not more episodes? Yes, but that doesn't mean that I should push for these secret episodes or secret endings or other endings. Like it just doesn't make sense for me. We will talk about some of these shows that I don't necessarily agree with. For instance, How I Met Your Mother was a big. It's probably in my top 10 as far as TV shows. It's one of those endings I just don't agree with the way that it ended, but I can see that it makes sense to the story. There's nothing in it that makes me go, well, they just came out of that, or they came up with that ending out of nowhere. No, it kind of made sense. I don't like the way it ended, but it made sense for I think some of the characters in it. Uh, so yeah, Game of Thrones is one that I enjoy. Another one, obviously, Stranger Things, I just alluded to. Stranger Things, I again, it'll go back and forth and things change and recency bias, but like this will always be a top show for me. From season one, when I was just captured by the storytelling, and I watched it from the beginning, watched it when it premiered. It wasn't a big monster when no pun intended. It was not a big monster TV show when it first debuted. I was kind of like that indie. It was like that indie film that nobody really was talking about. But as people started to get onto it, they really started to enjoy it, and then it became so big that it really did change the world of streaming. Like it was the first big streaming TV show I think we've ever had, and definitely the biggest in the zeitgeist of streaming. It will be pointed to as a foundation piece for what we know of streaming today. And I think that it's because of the development of the characters, the fact that they were able to do something in Hollywood that so many weren't against, where you make a TV show centered around kids, where kids are the main characters and main ideas of the storytelling, main aspect, the central focus of storytelling, um, and it's meant for adults. Like this kid show was not necessarily meant for the kids. It was meant for those that grew up in the 80s and 90s that remember a lot of these transition periods and especially the 80s. And I didn't grow up in the 80s, but there were a lot of things that hit home with me just because of the family values and everything else like that. So it's one of those TV shows that will always resonate with me, will always remain at the top of my list when it comes to ranking TV shows. And then last in my honor, or I guess my top six, because the honorable mention of Home Improvement or just the different categorization of Home Improvement. At number five, we got Ted Lasso. Sorry, I'm just trying to clear my throat here because of that illness. This one really hit during adulthood for me. This came out in 2020 when everything in the world seemed to be on fire. It seemed to be a real struggle to find anything positive. And everything about Ted Lasso, it's funny, it's emotional, it's hopeful. Sometimes it felt way too real. Sometimes it felt um, kind of a introspective of like how we feel as humans, right? Where there's so many things that go into this storytelling with Ted Lasso that I resonate with, that I think I try to idealize. I try to um, follow in his footsteps of being positive, whenever positive to a fault, right? I think that's something that you'll see in this podcast as well. And I think that that's where I'm a little different than most, is that, you know, if you tell a good story and I can link up different things, then I oftentimes enjoy what is said. Obviously, there are things that I disagree with or maybe that I don't like, but I think that we live in such a world of negativity and we have a hard time looking for the positive anymore. And I want to get back to that. I want to get back to, you know, and I know we're not going to all like the same shows or think the same things or have these all positive feelings and emotions about things. And there are some things that are worth critiquing, but I also think that sometimes we get into this idea where we've got to nitpick everything or follow along with what we think is the herd and think about like maybe we should all feel negative about the way things have ended. And not all stories are going to be incredibly detailed and wrap up every single aspect of the story. Otherwise, we would have TV shows that lasted 50 years. It's just not going to happen. And I think that's something we've gotten away from, where we expect everything to be spoon fed to us. And I think that there are some issues with that. But we'll get further and further into that as we get into our discussions of different shows. But Ted Lasso, I mean, there's really just not much to critique about it. Every single episode hit the emotions in different ways. It tackled real world problems, real world issues that I think a lot of shows try to shy away from, and they did it so spectacularly. And I'm glad that it's continued. I'm glad that we didn't. I mean, we got sort of like a what could have been an ending in season three, but they're going to continue the story with season four with the same core characters. So I'm really excited about where we're headed with Ted Lasso. Now let's move into the top five movies that I have on my list, and there are a few caveats with this one as well. All right, so top five movies. This first one is definitely a caveat because there are eight movies in this series, but I felt that and there's a reason why there's another one in this one that could have been included as well as a series, but I felt that the whole series itself, this first one, really impacted my life. And growing up, this is why I really got into storytelling, film, reading. Um, this was, besides Home Improvement, this was the foundation for my early childhood, adulthood, and I will never put anything above this as far as a franchise is concerned because it's still the best franchise, at least in my opinion. Um, I love Harry Potter. The Harry Potter franchise, the reason why I'm grouping this together is because separating them in this would just be emotional warfare on myself. This is the big first franchise I grew up with, watching the characters grow up at the same time I did. I mean, literally, when I started reading this, I was, I think, 12. And Harry, I believe, in the first book's 11. So, I mean, I grew up in this fictional world with these characters, but as I got older, so did the characters in the book, and I was right around the same age that Harry and his friends were when the movies started coming out. So I really did feel like, even though I know J.K. Rowling had written it earlier than, and I think it was written right, or the first book I think was 1991 or around that then, but it was before I was born. I think that right. When did? Hold on, let me check this out. When did Sorcerer Stone's book come out? I believe it was right. No, sorry, it was 1998 was when it was released in the US. So no, I was 5 years old, so that'll tell you how old I am. 1998, but still, when I started reading this book, it was right at the age in which Harry Potter was in that franchise, and, just the magic, the adventure, the friendship, it pulled me into a world that felt bigger than reality, and I never really left, and I've not left. I look forward to every single thing that is labeled Harry Potter. I'm really looking. I know a lot of people might not feel the same way, and I know there's a lot of different feelings about the creator, but I am one that can separate the people that have written these things from the story actually being told. And I don't want anything as far as personal beliefs to get in the way of me enjoying a story, because this story encompasses so many different things that I believe in. When you're talking about diversity, when you're talking about acceptance of outsiders, when you're talking about not being discriminatory, not being somebody who has racist beliefs, like Harry Potter was a lot of my core values. I mean, just being accepting of anybody, everybody, and all people, no matter what walks of life they're from. And that really resonates with me as an adult. I try to model myself after that. And I agree with the fact that everybody has a place in this world. You just got to find out where that is. And nobody should have the ability to keep you from wherever that is. So that's a really big one for me. Harry Potter, that's my number one movies, and nothing will ever dethrone that. The next one, going back to my childhood, still The Lion King. This one for me, obviously the best Disney film because I've got it in this top 5 list of movies ever. And people might go after my list and go, wow, this is like a kid's list or whatever it might be. But like these are the 5 movies that are just so foundational to things that I did growing up and watched and what I've truly enjoyed. And obviously, I can name thousands of movies that I've loved just as much. These are just 5 movies that are foundational for me. But Lion King is definitely one of those, just pure Disney perfection. Um, the opening to Lion King is probably one of the best openings in movie history. Um, I think if you told anybody to envision or picture or listen to, or I guess create that scene in their head again, they could with music and all of the Circle of Life as that plays and Lion King opens. It's still one of those movies today that I get chills. It's sad, it's happy, it's triumphant, it's all sorts of different things, the themes and just the characters itself. I have tons of Lion King merchandise and things like that that I'll show off, but we'll cover some of these movies and obviously some different things because the new Harry Potter show is coming out. You've got Lion King that's always progressing, telling different stories, and we always like to revisit Disney stuff. So we'll actually cover some Disney movies and shows on here as well. The Dark Knight is one that I watched growing up in high school, and I I can't remember there being a bigger movie than The Dark Knight when it was in theaters. It was such a massive thing in the zeitgeist. It was everybody was talking about it, everybody was watching it, everybody's going to go see it in the theaters because theaters were still massive. I mean, they're still big today, but they were massive back then. You went to the midnight viewings. Um, and The Dark Knight hit all sorts of different areas. It was a really dark movie, and I think that's why I liked it as a teen. It was very um, evil. Like the Joker is a very evil and warped person. Heath Ledger's Joker, one of the best in cinema, I believe, as far as villains are concerned. It just had so much tension. I love Christian Bale's Batman. I know some people don't, but I love that. It was one of those movies that I felt had great direction, performances, and writing all streamlined into one thing. It was a longer movie. It just felt like it had so much different, so many different things that it kind of took twists and turns when you didn't see them coming. So I really enjoyed The Dark Knight. Number 4, and this is one that I grew up watching. Obviously, it had come out long before I was born, but Star Wars: A New Hope. I think watching it knowing the magnitude in which it existed when it did first hit the theaters, and listening to cousins and family members that went and saw it at the drive-in, or at theaters when it first came out, and that scroll that starts A New Hope. It just it's filmmaking that has changed so many generations and reshaped generations of tired fans, and it changed the industry. It changed the way we tell stories. It changed the way that we think about um, just life itself, and this intergalactic space battle, and just everything in it was just cutting edge at that time. And then you think about it as it's progressed 20 years later and 30 years later, and we're starting to celebrate 50 years on Star. Like, it's crazy to think that this movie has resonated for so long, and it was released so long ago. And I can't think of another movie that's really transcended multiple generations and still is one of the top movies when you think about its genre today. A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, like, it just I just don't know if there's a better trilogy out there that's ever existed for what it's meant to the film industry than what Star Wars has done. Last but not least, and this one's kind of off the sleeve, off the cuff here. It's one that and this one was hard for me because I was like, what would be a good fifth one that I really enjoyed watching growing up? Remember the Titans. I think it's because taking something that's happened in the real world, being able to tell a story from it, teaching us lessons that we should know as human beings and a human race, but also in the way that, it has sports in it. I love sports, and I had a lot of different sports movies that ran through my mind in this instance, but it was one of those ones that, like, I watched over and over again when I was a kid, and now I've watched it multiple times as an adult. I used to teach high school, and I used to teach this movie because there's just something about it that hits perfect. If you like sports, if you like drama, you like humor, you like heart, um, you like political commentary, social commentary, this is top notch. This is a great movie. One of those movies that always ranks pretty high when you're talking about movies that, especially sports movies, that really resonate with fans from all different walks of life. Remember the Titans is a big one for me. And I feel that every time I revisit it, I'm like, this is such a flawless movie. Like, this is such a great story, a great lesson. And it goes beyond just watching and enjoying what's going on the screen. It's about life, and it's about acceptance, and why discriminatory behavior is not accepted. And I love that about Remember the Titans. I think it's still, and will continue to be, one of the top TV shows that will have ever existed in sports, film industry, and also just in general, because of everything that it tells us about who we are, and what we've become as not only a country but as people. So, really good top five uh, candidate there, and Remember the Titans, I feel. But yeah, let me know what your top five top shows and movies. Like, these are all should all be different for people. I mean, just because this is my top five doesn't mean that this is the objective. Like, these are the top five movies to ever exist. People love movies for all different things. That's what I love about starting this podcast, is that we all have so many different things that we watch or don't watch. And, hopefully I just can exist in a corner of different worlds where we can just talk about all these movies, because I can consume pretty much any type of movie and I will be happy. If it's entertaining and tells a good story, from Disney to Marvel to Star Wars, to indie film to westerns to sci-fi, I am in it all. I love drama. I love a good rom-com. I love romantics. I love all sorts of different things. So we'll get into all sorts of different TV shows, movies. Um, it's anything that's streaming, that we feel like is a good cover or people are talking about. We'd love to talk about it with you all. So let me know in the comments below. What are your favorite TV shows? What are your favorite movies? What are ones that shaped you as a kid, or are still relevant to you today, and why? Like, I'd love to hear your guys's top five list and why, just because I think it's fascinating. But just to wrap it up, those are a taste of my a handful of movies and shows, and shaped of who I am as a fan of these things, and why I love storytelling in the first place. There's so many more that we'll get into in future episodes, rewatches, deep dives, maybe even do a full rankings if I'm brave enough to do that. But for now, those are the pillars for me. And I look forward to many more, I guess, Saturday mornings. I guess not school nights anymore, but work nights or whatever it might be, binges, releases, premieres, debuts, whatever they might be. I'm looking forward to covering all of that on this podcast. And yeah, so that's the first episode of the Screen Society podcast. Thanks for joining me on day one. If you stick around, I promise we'll laugh, debate, wonder, rewatch, and maybe even yell at our screens together. And now let's officially kick things off with this final thought. Stranger Things is not having another episode. No, I'm kidding. But again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Go like, subscribe on YouTube. We are the Screen Society podcast over on YouTube. On X, we are still trying to change the username. I had to change the podcast name because there were other ones very similar to mine. So I am in the process of changing that at handle for X. But if you go ahead and search the Screen Society podcast on X, we should pop up. The old podcast was going to be called Grab Your Popcorn, but there were too many like that, so I changed it. So the at handle is still Grab Your Popcorn Pod over on X. So don't get confused by that, but it is the X profile picture will match the Screen Society podcast cover that you see on Spotify or YouTube. So just look for that, and hopefully I'll get that username changed very soon. But we are also on Instagram. If you search the Screen Society podcast, we will be posting there. And then I've got to start a TikTok channel, which we will start posting clips and things over there very shortly once I get that up and running. And that will be the Screen Society podcast over on TikTok as well. But again, thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will see you next time on the Screen Society podcast.